Trump's victory in the US election has significant implications that everyone needs to reflect on. For those who believed progressive, woke ideas were broadly popular, this result should be a wake-up call. It's now evident that these ideas, once portrayed as mainstream, don't have the overwhelming support many assumed. This is underscored by the fact that, for the first time, young voters, historically a Democratic bloc, leaned Republican. The gaming world, particularly game journalists, certainly believed that progressive virtue-signaling content was essential. It's clear why. These so-called journalists have long been activists, not objective reporters. Their goal was never to provide an accurate picture of the gaming world, but to control the narrative, pushing out non-woke gamers and developers. If you've been on the internet long enough, you might remember an attempt by game journalists to cancel the term gamer, claiming that it was associated with sexism and racism. They argued that anyone identifying as a gamer risked being linked to a hate group and suggested we be called players instead. For over a decade, game journalists have tried to influence and gatekeep the gaming industry. This was understandable on their part, but it was puzzling why developers went along. After all, developers want to make money. If your core audience supposedly buys games for the underdressed female characters, why not give them what they want? Then came the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy, which revealed why developers felt pressured. Game journalists could wield negative press, accusations of sexism, and poor reviews as leverage. We saw this strategy firsthand with Black Myth Wukong. There were articles and accusations about workplace harassment, which turned out to be a hoax. Journalists even criticized the game for a supposed lack of female representation, despite a whole chapter centered on female mythological characters. But I guess hot women doesn't count. Yet the best rating they gave Wukong was an 8 compared to 10s for Dragon Age Veilguard, and even Concord got 7s, both of which flopped while Wukong became one of the year's biggest releases. Game journalist bias is now apparent, as they've capitalized on young, left-leaning demographics to push developers into adopting a woke agenda. The argument went that if developers included progressive themes, they could supposedly capture the wider audience among younger players, even if it meant losing some conservative fans. But now, we're seeing proof that this approach was flawed. Even before the election, the cultural shift was noticeable. Just look at the anti-woke movement in gaming. It's nothing short of miraculous. For a long time, it seemed that the woke agenda in popular culture was unbeatable, embedded through consumerism. It was hard to imagine that gamers driven by the dopamine of each new AAA release would ever reject a game simply for featuring LGBTQ characters or an unrealistic portrayal of minorities and women. Yet here we are. Sweet Baby Inc. made it clear to mainstream gamers, if they want better games without political preaching, they'll have to avoid buying games that include it. Game journalists and publishers thought it was impossible, but here we are. Players didn't buy Star Wars Outlaws. Despite being a major AAA release with a beloved brand and following all the standard open-world formulas, and despite a media campaign, it flopped. Why? Because players waited for trusted YouTubers and streamers to give honest reviews, and they found out the game didn't live up to the hype. The same happened with Dragon Age. Marketed as the highly anticipated return of BioWare, it was supposed to be the biggest RPG in recent years, yet it sold fewer copies than Anthem. What do you think? Why?
So, I'm non-binary.
Who the fuck starts a conversation like that? I just sat down.
While gamers have started using their wallets to drive change, game journalists haven't stopped misrepresenting the success of these titles and bashing the gaming community for not buying them. We know we're labeled as sexists, transphobes, and worse for not supporting political messages in our games. But this kind of political blackmail just isn't working anymore. Gamers don't care about these labels. And this extends beyond gaming. People are voicing concerns about trans athletes in sports, crime, immigration topics once effectively banned from mainstream discourse. So, with this anti-woke movement in gaming and broader public conversations, is it really so surprising that Trump won? Just think about it.